Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to a new video. So we're going to be doing an install on the STI tonight. I have been installing driver modifications. The last thing that we did are the beat rust differential bushings. Love them. It made a huge change in how this car felt. So now we're just carrying down the line. So the next thing, or what we're going to be doing in this video, is actually installing the Perrin transmission mount. So I have it over here on the workbench. Really simple install. It's just a matter of getting to it. Everything is supplied, including the instructions of how to actually do it. So it's very straightforward. As you can see, it's a very nicely made product. All of the mounts and everything that I've been using on this car, I have been using Perrin. I have the Perrin pitch stop, the Perrin pitch stop mount that goes against the firewall, the stainless Perrin clutch line, which comes with the Perrin pitch stop mounts. I'm also using the Perrin brake master cylinder brace as well. So I figured it was only fair to go with the Perrin transmissions mount. There's a bunch of different brands that make these. Honestly, they are all good. I don't think you can go wrong. But for me, I've just gone with Perrin just because of the quality, and it looks fantastic, and I've never had an issue with any Perrin product. I also got Perrin end links, Perrin sway bars. I got the Perrin strut bar as well. Lots of Perrin stuff on this car, and it has never let me down. So I figured it was only fair just to go with the Perrin transmission mount. So what we're going to be doing in this video is actually installing this. I'm going to show you how to do it. Really simple, very straightforward. Hopefully we don't run into any issues, but hey, that's what comes along with installing modifications on your car. Sometimes things go wrong and you got to figure it out and get through it. So that is what we're going to be doing in this video. So let's go ahead. Let's first jack up the car, get everything set. I got a new light for everybody so we can actually see what we're doing, and then we can go from there. So let me do that off camera, get set up, and then I'll show you where we're working. All right, so we got the car jacked up and we are ready to go. So if you can see this brace going across, that is the cross member brace. We're going to remove that, and the actual transmission mount is underneath that. So they're 14 and 17 millimeter bolts. There's a couple on either side, front and back. So we're gonna go ahead and remove them, get that brace off, and then we're gonna put a jack underneath the transmission to kind of hold it in place. And then we can go ahead and start removing the actual transmission mount. I'm going to go over all the sizes and everything once I get a better look under there, but I figured I'd point it out first before we start getting going, since there's not much space down here and I hate working underneath cars on jack stands. So I figured I would just show you guys before we get started. So let me go ahead and start removing some bolts, and then we can go from there. All right, so I got the entire cross member brace out as well as the mounts. I ended up stripping the 14 millimeter nut on here a little bit, which is not a big deal since we are replacing them. But I do need to get it off since I do need to reuse this cross member. But I did find it much easier just to remove everything at once. Once I removed the two 17 millimeters on either side and then the 14 millimeters out back, I was able to gain access to the 14 millimeters on the actual mount. I was able to kind of move this back and forth and get a impact in there, and it came right out. So I think that's the easiest way to do it. Now, I didn't jack the transmission up because I didn't see it move at all. Now I'll find out once I actually go to put the new mount in to see if it actually moved a little bit. But either way, I think this is the easiest way instead of removing these on the car. You know, if you do have a stripped nut here, you can just take the whole thing out. So this is a 14 millimeter nut. So what I'm going to do is try to jam a 13 on there and try to loosen it up. Otherwise, we're going to try to think of something else. Might just cut it off or something, but we will see. But there is the stock mount. I'll show you once I get it off and compare the two. But let me go ahead and try to get that off, and then we'll go from there. All right, so we got the nut off. What I ended up doing was using a 14 millimeter, which is this size, and I just stripped it down as much as I could. And then I took a 13 millimeter, a hammer, and slammed it on there as best as I could, and it came loose. So it is free. Thankfully, that only took a couple minutes. At the beginning of the install, something like that always happens, but I'm glad I was able to figure it out very quickly and it didn't take up too much time. So let's go ahead, let's compare this to the Perrin mount so I can show you the differences and just how crappy this is compared to the Perrin one. And then we can get to installing the new one. All right, so here is the difference now. This is the Perrin one. We already went over everything. And this is the stock one. But as you can see, I can literally move this whole entire bushing mount with my hands. This one is actually has poly bushing, so the thing is not going to move. Now this is going to increase NVH. What NVH actually is noise, vibration, and harshness. So you're going to hear more of a transmission whine, especially 1 through 3, and in lower gears, 1 and 2 especially. So keep that in mind if you're not looking to add some NVH to your car. I would not recommend installing something like this. But for me, this is not my daily, this is my fun car, so I don't need to really worry about everything being super quiet. It's not really a big concern of mine. Plus, I like the sound of the whine. It sounds more race car, and it just kind of enhances the overall driving experience. So there you go. There's the difference. Now with the Perrin mount, as you can see, there's 2 different feet, and it says left and right. So if the front of the car is facing this way, so there's only one way to put this on. As you can tell, there's different feet. So the mount that's jutting out to the left like this goes on the driver's side of the car, and the one that's just lined up like this goes to the passenger side. So if you can tell over here, I lined up the bolts exactly where they go. I do need to find a new 14mm nut, which I'm pretty sure I have, for the center mount, which actually goes into the transmission, which are actually the bolts over here. They include new ones. What I'm going to do is take these 4 14mm. They go in each one of these holes. It bolts directly to the transmission. I'm going to loosely install it. I'm not going to torque it down yet. And they're saying 26 foot-pounds for each of them. So I'm just going to do them with a wrench, hand tight, make them nice and firm, not go crazy. I'm not going to use my impact on them because it's going into the transmission, and you don't want to do that. So just tighten them up nice and snug, nothing crazy, and then we can go ahead and start throwing on the cross member brace and kind of getting everything back. But I'm going to go ahead and put this in the car first, see where it's positioned, make sure everything lines up, how it fits and everything like that, and then we can move on to the next step and wrap this install up. Wow, so actually reading the instructions, which I have right here, I realized I actually don't need the 14mm since it comes with 14mm bolts. And the really cool thing is, in the actual mount, if you can kind of tell, it's threaded, so you don't need an actual nut. They just thread directly into the mount like this, and then you're going to tighten them down. So that is really cool, and I don't need to find a new 14mm. So who cares if you strip it? As long as you can get it off, you are good to go. But that is what you're going to need. You're going to put the washer on as well. But yeah, so let me go ahead and get the mount on with the 4 14mm from the stock mount, and then we can go ahead and start moving on to the next step. All right, so I took it back out of the car because I realized these bolts are actually in the way. As you can see, you can't get a socket in there. So they actually said that in the instructions. I was trying to see if I can get away with it, but I'm going to remove these nuts, slide them out, just take the actual brace that goes across here out, install the mounts on either side, and then I can go ahead and put this back on the car. So kind of a pain in the butt, but that's what you got to do, and you don't want to strip these bolts right here, so that's the best option. So let me get these off, and then we'll get back to putting it back on the car. All right, guys, so the mount is actually all tightened down and everything. The bolts for the actual bushings are 50 foot-pounds. I just took my impact to it just to be sure. And then the bolts, as you guys saw, just do them hand tight with a normal wrench. You don't need to use the impact because you don't want to strip out those threads in the transmission. So now that we got that installed, now we can go ahead and start putting on the cross member, get everything bolted back up. All you're going to be using is the stock bolts. Everything you took off, it's just going to go right back in, except for the 14 millimeters that go in the middle of the mount right there. You're going to use the supplied zinc coated 14 millimeters that are going to thread directly into the mount. And then we can finish this up. So let me go ahead and get this in. It's really hard to get angles under here with the camera since I didn't really jack it up too high. It's on the lowest level. I thought I was going to be able to work under here just fine, but you know, hopefully one day I can afford a lift, a proper lift, so I don't have to crawl under cars anymore because, you know, being my age, it gets tiring and kind of a pain in the butt. But we're getting this done, and we should be finished up pretty soon. So let me go ahead, get the cross member brace in, get everything bolted up, and then I'll show you guys the finished product. All right, guys, so cross member, everything is bolted down. I use an impact, and I made sure with a wrench and everything, make sure everything's nice and snug and tight. Now the torque specs are on the actual instructions from Perrin, but the 17 millimeters on either side of the front of the brace are like 100 something foot-pounds, and the rears are a little less. I think they're like 53 or something like that. Don't hold me to it, just look at the instructions, it's there. But I just took my impact to it. The only ones I didn't take my impact to were the back 14 millimeters, the 1, 2, and 3, 4 in the back there. I just tightened them down because they were like 25 foot-pounds or something very, very light. But it is in there, and I am beat from laying on my back. So for me, the hardest part to line everything up was the back two 14 millimeters. Kind of hard to see, you can't even see them because the brace is in the way. I think there's one there and one there. The really cool thing is if you look in between each 14 millimeter on the back brace, there's a little, sorry, my finger's shaking, but there's a little hole right there. And if you take a screwdriver, you can put it in there and actually pry it and be able to position it so you can line all the bolts up, which was really, really nice. It's on either side because I was having trouble lining everything up. So you can see the hole right there in between the bolts. Just stick a flathead or a screwdriver or a pry bar, anything that fits in there, and then you can kind of pry it whichever direction you need it to make sure the bolts line up with the threads properly, because you don't want to strip them. So I found that to be really, really easy once I figured that out. I'm sure it's on the instructions, but hey, sometimes I just don't look at the instructions because I'm a guy and that's just typically what we do. But everything is bolted down. There are the included 14 millimeter bolts that come with the Perrin transmission mount. Can't even see it, but it is in there and we are good. And I'm happy that is finished. So now I'm going to clean everything up and we can wrap this video up. And I figure I would mention it, but I did a whole video on how I jack up my STI. You guys see that it's just in the middle. It kind of lines up with the front of the door handle. But if you look back on the back side of the skirt, you can see there is a pinch weld right there. And that is where I jack it up to get it right in the middle so I can get a jack stand on either side at the same time instead of doing one by one. So I know a lot of people ask me that, but that is how I jack up the car. And it has worked for me for years. So there you go. All right, guys, everything is cleaned up. Everything is away. We are wrapped up with the Perrin transmission mount install. Very simple. Obviously, if you had a lift or quick jacks, which I've been meaning to get, I know a lot of people always tell me to get those, it would have been a lot easier. I also did jack up the transmission just a little bit when I was lining up the holes. That helped as well. But you don't need to do much. You don't obviously want to lift the car on the transmission. You kind of watch the transmission, you'll see it move, and then once the car kind of bumps up, then you kind of let off a little bit and it usually lines up perfectly. So it takes a little bit of trial and error to get those bolts lined up, but once you do, you know, thread them in and, you know, torque everything down and you're good to go. So this video is just the install. It's just me going over how to put this actually in the car, going over everything you need to know to install it onto your STI. Also, quick note, it does come with one of these plates. This is for, as you can see, it says 5-speed only. So this is for the WRXs. You do need to use this plate, this spacer plate, when you're installing it. It mentions it in the directions, so if you have the 5-speed, you do need this. Any STI, you don't need that, so you are good to go. But yeah, I'm going to be doing a full review of this as well, just like I did the Beat Rush diff bushings. I want to get some seat time and drive it and just formulate a proper opinion on this. I don't want to say, oh, it's great, when I haven't even driven the car yet, because that is not a review, and I can't tell you if it's good or bad, if I'm going to remove it or what. So I want to get some seat time, going to drive the car, and then I will do a full review on it and let you know what I think. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how much this changed. One of the things that I love doing, I mentioned this in another video, is actually installing one piece at a time. I don't like installing a bunch of things at once, because that way you don't know what made a difference or not. You know, when you just throw a whole bunch of stuff on at once, it gets confusing. You don't really know how much that specific mod changed the overall feel of the car and all that. So I'm doing it one by one. I did the diff bushings, drove it like that, enjoyed it, did a review. Now I did the transmission mount. I'm going to see how that is. I'll do a review. And then we got some stuff over here as well. We got the front sway bar that I'm going to be installing on here as well. So one by one, I'm getting these installs knocked out. We still also have to do the JDM folding mirrors as well. So, and we also over here have the Varus Engineering load control arm covers. I've been talking about those for like 3 months now, but still plenty of installs to come. Looking forward to it. I also have another M car that I'm going to be reviewing next week. I have it for the entire week, so stay tuned for that. I'm really looking forward to it. But as for this one, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions at all about the install or the Perrin transmission mount or anything else on this car, please let me know in the comments below. But in the meantime, keep it clean, keep it simple, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.